welcome. There's a huge wave of digital transformation that's sweeping large companies and small companies worldwide, and particularly in the more advanced markets where information technology is playing a key role in helping companies deliver better products and services. What does that digital transformation really entail, and are all components of digital transformation moving in that same speed, and what does that in turn mean for Indian IT, an Indian IT services company? I'm joined to discuss that by Peter Bendor-Samuel, founder of the Everest Group, a well-known IT consulting company based out of the United States. And let's understand from him what the digital transformation story or journey means till today, and where could it go in coming months and year.
Sure. Well, the first thing I want to observe is, digital transformation is very pervasive. If you think about IT spend, almost all the new spend that is happening in the US and really in Europe is against digital transformation. And so it's kind of super important both to the industry and to the world. Now, as we think about digital transformation, really the way we do is we group it into two categories. The one that gets the most press is digital transformation for business transformation. Examples for that is you've got sort of where you change the customer experience, right? So, how Amazon has changed buying, right? They've changed the customer experience. And what that does is it changes the competitive position of the company and clearly allows them to capture market share, or if they don't change, others capture their market share. So super important. Interestingly, over the last year, we have a new kind of transformation that's coming along, and we call that modernization. And modernization is driven by the need to change, but this is where we're changing our estates so that we can change. An example of this would be, for example, the journey to hybrid cloud, or maybe the journey to DevOps. In this situation, IT organizations are changing themselves or modernizing themselves so they can better drive the business transformation. And
what's driving this? For instance, hybrid cloud, which could be, let's say, private cloud and public cloud. What's driving this, and therefore the modernization?
Sure. So there's really two things that drive, for example, the journey to cloud. The first is, if you're going to go through digital transformation for your business, you really need a much more responsive, flexible, agile infrastructure to support that. And most legacy infrastructures won't do that. Interestingly, what we're finding is not just one, we have a hybrid, so we have a variety of clouds, and it's the journey to get there, which is the modernization journey. So, so there's the imperative is so I can transform. Also interestingly, when I do that, I crush the cost to serve. So often these digital journeys result in a 30 to sometimes a 90+% reduction in cost. So, so it's great to do good, but to save money and do good, awesome. And hence why these modernization journeys have those dual axes, enable transformation or better experience while saving money. It's very compelling.
Right, and if you were to go deeper into the modernization bit, and you said that a lot of that has been happening in the last 1 year, are Indian IT services companies able to deliver to that need and to that demand?
Well, what we've seen over the last several years is Indian firms rising to that challenge. So if you go back a couple of years ago, the Indian firms were really on the sidelines, right? They were stuck in the legacy, but I think through focus, investments, they have positioned themselves where they are now real partners in driving that. I think another thing that has really enabled the Indian firms to succeed is, in the last few years, we've been piloting these technologies. We've been experimenting with them. But now we're modernizing, we're doing them at scale. And there really is no other organization, there's no other talent pool other than the Indian firms and the Indian talent pool that can drive it at scale. So you might go to a fintech or a tech startup 2 years ago to experiment, but they are not going to be able to do it at scale. They're not going to be able to port the whole estate into cloud. You have to go to real muscle, and the people who have real muscle in today's world are the Indian service providers.
Right. The other point that you've talked about is that the transformation process also involves collapsing business processes into data. and that's when maybe the real magic starts emerging, and you can use that data to take decisions and so on. And is that journey been as fast as we thought it would be? Is it taking longer?
So yes, these changes are very profound, right? And we move from a process-driven world to a data-driven world, right? And as we do that, we tend to collapse organizations. Those changes, this is less a story about technology, and the difficulty is less about the technology and more about the ability to manage the change. Just to give an illustration, I'll give you a good illustration. So classically in a legacy estate, we have maybe 50 to 500, a person can manage 50 to 500 servers. Google is managing tens of thousands of servers per person. The implication of that is the organization Google is driving in their cloud estate, okay, is completely different than the one to manage the old infrastructure model. And so it's that change, it's that idea, wait a minute, I have different people, far fewer, doing very different things, which is actually creating the resistance to this, and why these changes typically take multiple years and can't be done quickly.
Right. And let me ask you a question about the US economy as well, and something that you've been talking about of late there is some expectation of a slowdown, and if there is, or even if things are where they are, is that likely to affect the way IT spends will happen, including in the areas that you talked about, that's modernization?
Sure. Well, conventional wisdom says we're moving into a slowdown in the global economy. The one perhaps controversy is whether or not the US will follow. I mean, we already see Europe heading there and the rest of the world. The US has been sort of the unusual story. It seems highly likely towards the third and fourth quarter we're likely to go into a deceleration. Whether or not with full-blown recession, a little unclear, but certainly a deceleration. So then the question is what that happens to IT spend. Well, the IT spend, the discretionary portion of that will certainly suffer in a slowdown. We know that from all past experiences. What makes this a little different is this modernization we were talking about. Modernization delivers these cost savings we talked about, and in a slowdown or recession, cost savings is what everyone's jonesing for, what we're all looking for, right? So given the degree of these savings that are become apparent because of these digital transformations in a modernization movement, we anticipate that we'll have much more growth in this turn down than we will in previous ones.
Right. Right. Yeah. Go ahead.
So I think, you know, I think, and given the momentum and amount of capital and the conviction that companies are driving this modernization now, we believe that we may come down 2 or 3 points of growth in a slowing economy, but we will still maintain a robust growth going forward, which is unusual for a recessionary environment.
Right. One more question. So, you know, when you've been coming here every year, and I'm sure for many years now, and you've been seeing the discussions, the anticipation, the hype perhaps around so many things, including new technologies, the whole AI, digital wave. How much do you think has converted into reality, and how much do you think has remained as hype, and are there any lessons from all of that?
Well, there's always a lot more hype than there is reality, right? I mean, we love to spin a story, we love to tell a story. I think historically, I mean, if you think over a 20-year period, we've had a lot of change, right? And I think in this instance, I think we need to be careful. Yes, there's a lot of money coming in to drive digital transformation, but these journeys are 3-5-year journeys, and that takes time. It will take time, and I think the real question, or one of the real interesting questions, is will we start to see significant cannibalization of our existing estates, our legacy? To date, we see legacy shrinking maybe 3% a year, which really isn't that material. If you look at if you kind of do the math and look at the potential for what will happen when cannibalization takes place, I think we can see expect those estates to shrink somewhere between 30 and 90%, right? So I think we will see that legacy starting to cannibalize by digital, but I think it will take a few years, and the growth that we're experiencing in the digital, I think, will more than offset the the compression we have in our existing business space.
Right. And last question, I mean, as you look at 2019-20, are there any broad mega trends that you are going to be watching for very carefully because that could affect things positively or otherwise?
Well, I think setting aside the digital transformation and how that works, I mean, I think a really interesting thing is whether we see AI maturing and starting to become a more significant part of the digital platforms. I think that's going to be very interesting. I do think we need to keep our eye on this cannibalization issue, right? I think we've seen the early effects of that. If that starts to accelerate, I think we've got quite a lot of pain on our hands. If that gets spread out over 3 to 7 years, I think it's very manageable.
Right. On that note, Peter Bendor-Samuel, thank you so much for speaking with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.